Hey guys, welcome back. So we are going to be checking out 5 more videos of the Storytellers, episodes 5 all the way to episode 9. So we're going to be checking out, let's see, episode 5 is the Enclave, where we left off. Episode 6 is the NCR, the New Republic, California Republic, I mean. 7 is Caesar's Legion. Number 9, Mr. House, New Vegas. And let's see. Wait, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Oh wait, and one more. The Great Cons. I can't count. Anyways, to start off, I did a little bit more research as to like why everyone kept us saying "rip the Storyteller," and I found out why. I may be incorrect, but please correct me if I'm wrong. So apparently, the Storyteller did pass away, a long time ago, and if I remember correctly, it was there was a comment on one of the other videos. It was like 12 hours long. I did not watch it. I just saw the top comment, which was actually from the Storyteller's wife. And I guess she said that he passed because he had cancer, and that led to his passing and all that. So that's really unfortunate. So rest in peace to the Storyteller. I mean, so far I've only watched like 5 of the videos, and I enjoyed every single one of them. The way he presents it and narrates it, it's all amazing. So I hope he does rest in peace, and we'll just continue on with the next 5 videos, but it's just unfortunate that cancer got him. So let's begin with the Enclave.
You've experienced the Fallout series in your own way, but want to learn more about
Captions.
the story. Well, to get to the heart of the story, you have to go back to the beginning.
So just for this first one, I'm not going to skip the intro, but the next ones I will. Just a little bit. Alright, the Enclave. Remnants of the government.
As far as anyone knows, this wasteland is the best damned wasteland in the world. When America and China went head-to-head 200 years ago, both sides launched everything they had, and most people assume that China was blasted back to the Stone Age. The only way to know for sure is to jump in a boat and paddle across the ocean, so folks just assume that China, Europe, Canada, and the rest of the world got hit at least as bad as America did. People look out at this land, and some of them just know in their hearts that it's the garden spot of the whole world. Maybe that's why we can't go more than a few decades without someone trying to take over the place. When humanity was just beginning the struggle to rebuild after the war, there was no sign of the government helping out. People formed tribes led by the strongest warriors and the smartest scavengers. The chain of command and the line of succession meant nothing to people who needed things done fast. The closest thing to a government that emerged was tribal elders, or the mayors of small villages. Eventually, in 2189, some of the larger towns in California banded together and formed the new California Republic, but they never claimed to be the government. With no communications from the pre-war government for over a century, the memory of it faded as new generations replaced the old, convinced the old president and his kind were long dead, but the wasteland ain't so lucky. 200 years ago, in the last days before the Great War, a secret coterie of America's top-ranking political and corporate leaders decided to duck and cover, big time. They scurried right off the continent, hid inside a secret offshore base, then cowered there while the rest of the country suffered a nuclear holocaust the government had caused.
Had to save themselves.
They stayed, safe and hidden for decades. The group we know today as the Enclave is the result of 10 generations of breeding between politicians, military brass, and corporate executives. The direct descendants of the people who caused the apocalypse? Not many people would make up a story like that, so it's probably safe to take them at their word about their ancestors. Regardless of who their great-grandparents were, the Enclave certainly has access to an abundance of pre-war tech and weapons. They hoarded it on a man-made island, a metal city that grew out of the ocean floor. It was once used to refine oil, back when people could pull oil right out of the bottom of the sea. The Poseidon oil rig was inaccessible to people on the mainland, so no one knew they were out there until they began their plan to rid the Wasteland of everyone who didn't fit their definition of a real American. The Enclave had spent decades learning to improve upon pre-war weaponry. They weren't just collecting artifacts of the old world like the Brotherhood. They were looking toward the future. They had devices more advanced than anything seen in the Wasteland, including the Brotherhood. It wasn't just better guns or the ginchiest armor. The Enclave had a fleet of flying vehicles they called vertibirds. Most folk had never even seen a car move unless it was hitched to a team of Brahmin, so these vertibirds gave the Enclave an edge over every other human group in the Wasteland. They could send in drop teams to kidnap whole villages at a time to use as test subjects. They could suddenly appear at remote locations, then just as quickly disappear. Most importantly, they could travel to and from their offshore base secure in the knowledge that no one could follow. Well, almost no one. There was a person back then who seemed to have a knack for getting vehicles up and running again. People who lived in the dens swore up and down that somewhere around 2242, they saw a person in a vault jumpsuit driving around in an old Christless Highwayman, the big green mutant taking up the entire back seat, and a cyborg dog poking his nose out the window. That's a sort of tall tale that would be easy to dismiss, but it happened in the same year someone managed to get a ship seaworthy again. They sailed that tanker right out into the ocean to the Enclave's base and took them down. Stories like that, they fill a body with hope.
Someone got a ship up and running and went out to the ocean and took down the Enclave. Is it part of one of the games? Because, like I said, I've only played a little bit of New Vegas and Fallout 4, but I never touched 3 or 2 or anything like that. So if it is, please let me know. But besides that, so the Enclave, of course, they prepped and stored as much as they could, like as many weapons, rations, and resources as much as they could. And they converted an oil rig into a huge city. So that would explain how they survived. Because I mean, they knew what was going to happen. They prepped, and they're the ones that pretty much knew that they're going to have an edge over the Wasteland.
Oh, maybe with enough work, we could all be driving around in pre-war cars, living the good life. In a way, that sort of hope for the future was what the Enclave wanted. And they got it at the cost of their own lives. Their ambition was their downfall. They weren't content to live out their lives in prosperity. They had to take back their country from the people they viewed as subhuman. To do so, the Enclave engaged in the sort of daredevil science that brought about the end, the Great War. They engineered a virus tailored for genocide, performed inhuman experiments, and even took to playing God by creating a species of intelligent deathclaws. Just like their ordinary brethren, they were giant beasts that could rip a man in half.
Yeah, I remember fighting one
like
still.
You and me, and even mimic human speech. But even deathclaws were nothing when compared to the Enclave's deadliest creation, a man named Frank.
Frank Horrigan.
It's hard to say just what Frank Horrigan was. People who saw him in person tended to die quickly and gruesomely. At some point, he must have been a man, a brutal killer, but still human. When the Enclave discovered the old Mariposa military base and the forced evolutionary virus bats within, Horrigan was exposed by accident. He was among the first of a new generation of super mutants created years after the Master's downfall. The arrogance of the Enclave's leaders led them to believe that they could improve upon the virus. The FEV and Horrigan were used for horrid experiments that would make the Master cringe. When they could learn no more from his suffering, the Enclave turned Frank into their most devastating soldier, a mutated cybernetic terror encased in their finest power armor. It's hard to imagine how anyone managed to defeat arguably the most dangerous being to ever walk the Wasteland and bring down his Enclave masters. But somehow, the chosen one of an obscure northern tribe destroyed the Enclave oil rig, forcing the Enclave to flee New California. Leaderless and directionless, they soon rallied behind Autumn, a senior scientist who was contacted by a new Enclave president. It didn't take long for the remnants to reach the East Coast with their vertibirds. They had no fancy oil rig this time. They soon nestled into Raven Rock and Adams Air Force Base, pre-war bases that were nearly as impregnable. They changed their routine in Washington, D.C., promising that they could guide America back to the golden age of malt shops and drive-in movies. On the West Coast, they had a man...
So basically, they're trying to rebuild everything in the Wastelands, bring it back to what it usually was, pre-war. But however, this time, they're in control of everything.
who claimed to be the rightfully elected president of the United States. But by the time they reached the capital Wasteland, things had changed a little. Now their president remained unseen and only addressed the public through a swarm of floating propaganda robots that spewed stars and stripes forever, along with political rhetoric so hollow that it sounded like it was written by a random word generator. The war for control of the capital Wasteland was a trial for the Enclave, bereft of their island fortress, without the unstoppable brutality of Frank Horrigan. They had to fight a hard war to gain territory. The Brotherhood of Steel had a strong presence in Washington, D.C., and super mutants roamed the streets looking for humans to abduct.
Yeah, so that's a challenge.
Still had their technological superiority and their vertebrates. They even took control of pre-war satellites and could fire missiles that had been waiting in the sky for hundreds of years.
The Hercules.
Their greatest weapons were deceit and manipulation.
I think.
The Brotherhood relied on a local wanderer for help in combating the Enclave. It is possible that the Enclave managed to convince this individual to implement a more subtle plan that could accomplish their goals even after their repeated defeats at the hands
Which game
of the
is it?
Brotherhood. Yet, it did not save them. In 2277, following their disastrous defeat by Liberty Prime at the Purifier, the Enclave was shattered again, with its leaders dead or missing. Its major strongholds were soon annihilated by Brotherhood strikes. The few surviving members probably wished that they had stayed hidden on their private island out in the Pacific. Now the once mighty remnants of America's elite have been reduced to a handful of wistful old men hiding out in the wastelands.
Damn, how far they have fallen.
Most gave up on the Enclave's vision of the world and settled down to live quiet lives, getting as much peace as a person can in the wasteland. Travelers who visit a certain old motel in Novak can speak with a former Enclave pilot who isn't as bad as the legends make the Enclave sound. She's a tough old broad, but she's no Frank Horrigan. Out east, the Enclave continues to operate in small bands that harass the Brotherhood and anyone else who strays too closely to their remaining outposts, but they are devoid of leadership or any long-term plans. In the west, sharp-eyed travelers can sometimes spot the rusted hulks of crashed vertebrates. There's little else remaining of the Enclave, or at least that the Enclave wishes to reveal. Could an organization with such resources be entirely stamped out? Much like radroaches, the Enclave has shown remarkable resilience. The people of the Wasteland should be prepared to deal with another hidden nest of these relics of the old days. For now, the Enclave has joined the ranks of those who fancied themselves the rightful rulers of the Wasteland. Their glory has faded along with that of others like the Master. But it seems like some lessons are never learned. There's always someone new looking to claim our Wasteland as their own. The new California Republic has flourished even as the Enclave faded, while the NCR has ruled their lands with relative peace and prosperity. Even this period of stability is threatened by a new would-be tyrant that seeks to rebuild yet another fallen empire.
And they're the next topic.
Is a story for another day.
Here we go.
Here I come, yeah! Right back where I started from.
I'm sorry for cutting out the music, but so looks like the whole story that was told about the Enclave, like the Chosen One and working with the Brotherhood, it must be connected to one of the games, but I just don't know which game. So if you guys can put it down in the comments below, it's got to be at least 2 or 3, because I don't think there was fighting against the Enclave in 4. Because I remember in 4, fight with Minutemen, you do meet the Brotherhood, and I do know something about the Institute, but I don't remember about an Enclave. So, I don't know. Alright, now let's check out the new California Republic.
You've experienced the Fallout series in your own way.
Here we go.
Tired of life in the new California Republic? Want to enjoy a weekend with no pesky laws or nosy government looking over your shoulder? Come to New Reno and experience the Wasteland as it was meant to be experienced. Stock up on your favorite chems like Psycho, Buff Out, and that new Reno sensation, Jet.
Aren't those drugs?
Enjoy a visit to one of our many brothels, or even become the star of your own adult holotape. No money? No problem. Our merchants accept pre-war magazines, lumps of ore, and use jet nozzles as payment. It's a new world with new rules, and New Reno is the biggest little town in the Wasteland.
Humility is a virtue in the Wasteland. One will not find dignity when scavenging in a pile of rubble. Those who are lucky enough to be born into prosperity
I just want to say that was one hell of a commercial.
should know that their way of life can vanish in a moment. Likewise, those who come from humble beginnings must believe that they have the potential to build empires, lead armies, or heal the world around them. Each generation has seen would-be conquerors who seek to forge their own utopia from the ashes of the old world. But the most successful attempt at rebuilding has come from the most humble of origins. Shady Sands sounds like the sort of thing you'd read on a pre-war postcard. A tropical getaway for bored families in the old world. But Shady Sands was actually a little village in California, made up of the people who came out of one of the vaults. Lucky for them, their vault, number 15, wasn't so bad, at least when compared to some of the other ones. It was designed to open 50 years after the Great War, and its inhabitants were well supplied, even though they were deliberately made up of people who Vault-Tec knew wouldn't get along. They managed to keep from killing each other until the doors opened. Then most of Vault 15's inhabitants tore through the Wasteland, forming some of the worst raider gangs the Wasteland would ever see. Even the great Khans today can trace their heritage back to the hooligans who came out of Vault 15.
Oh, did not
all
know
of them
that.
are troublemakers like the Khans, though. Quite a few decided to settle down and build a farming town. They had some gadgetry from the vault that made Shady Sands a prosperous little place. But that prosperity also made them a target. Raiders
Typical.
attacked Shady Sands without mercy, even going so far as to kidnap the mayor's daughter. Superstitious folk will say it was destiny that brought the Vault Dweller to Shady Sands at their time of need.
Protect a
Or
main
maybe
character.
it was just because Vault 13 happened to be located nearby, and people are always in need. For whatever reason, Shady
Wait, if it's Vault 13, then that means I think this is New Vegas, because all I remember, the reason why I say that is because I still remember from New Vegas that little quote: "You take a sip from your trusty Vault 13 canteen." So that's my guess.
Sands was the first place that tested the now famous Vault Dweller. This was before that kid from Vault 13 became the hero of the Wasteland. The example set by the heroics of the Vault Dwellers stuck with the people who lived in Shady Sands. Folk like Eridesh, Tandy, and Seth, names that will go in the history books once someone starts writing down history again. Junktown, the Hub, and other places that the Vault Dweller passed through all felt the same call to be a part of something greater. The mayor of Shady Sands, Eridesh, guided the most influential communities of the 22nd century. Each one had played some small role in saving the Wasteland, and this brought them together. In those early years of this new California Republic, even the Brotherhood of Steel was an ally, their original headquarters being right in the heart of the NCR. That alliance lasted about as long as you'd expect, but it shows that the Brotherhood and the NCR could get along. Eridesh was made president for life of the NCR. He lived
For
a
life?
good long life, but like many old men, he wanted to head out on a few final adventures before death came calling.
Wait, so that's the thing for being a president of NCR? It's for life? There's no terms or anything?
He disappeared out in the Wasteland one day, probably looking for his old friend, the Vault Dweller. We're not sure exactly how it ended for Eridesh. When they write those NCR history books, they'll probably make up something suitably noble and heroic for his last adventure. With Eridesh gone, the natural successor was his daughter Tandy. The official records don't like to dwell on the way that President Tandy once had to be rescued from the Khans by the Vault Dweller. Getting kidnapped wouldn't seem very presidential, but that sort of humbling experience helped mold her into an ambitious leader who was wise enough to know the dangers of the Wasteland around her. She led the NCR until she was nearly 100 years old. A
Wow.
ripe old age for someone who never mutated, and she spent the whole time trying to unify the towns north of the NCR.
Okay, so she did something really well.
While places like the Hub and Boneyard were glad to join the NCR, up north things were a bit trickier. The Republic had access to some pre-war tech from Vaults 15 and 13, but that was nothing compared to the wonders of Vault City. Vault City was the community that surrounded
Oh yeah,
8,
Vault City.
and it was the embodiment of everything that Vault-Tec had promised people before the war. It was one of the few vaults that opened right on schedule, just a few years after the war, and the happy people inside emerged to build their own private Garden of Eden, with a little help from Vault-Tec's Garden of Eden creation kit. The
Geck.
folks that ran Vault City had a stranglehold on their territory. They had the finest medical equipment available, and a security force to defend it. plus plenty of outsiders who were willing to become servants in exchange for a safe place to live. They didn't need to be part of this new California Republic, and neither did nearby towns like New Reno, Redding, and Broken Hills. Even the NCR's mother vault, Vault 15, had fallen into disrepair by the time that Tandy was nearing the end of her presidency. And Vault 13, well, the original inhabitants had been relocated by the Enclave, and a new group of occupants had taken up residency. Good conversationalists by all accounts, but not the sort that most people would want as neighbors. The NCR was so keen on expanding their territory that they even resorted to playing dirty tricks on Vault City to get them to join and share their medical supplies with the rest of the Republic. For all its good intentions, the NCR was heading down a road to the cutthroat politics of the old days. The Wasteland isn't prone to unity. Many would-be rulers discovered that the hard way, and it was a lesson the NCR was all too familiar with.
So the NCR forced Vault City to join because Vault City had great medical tech and security, so they would have been a great addition to the Republic. But that right there got really close to corruption and, as you said, away like the old ways.
In the years since, the NCR has had a series of presidents, none of which managed to rule with the insight of Aradesh or Tandy. The new leadership has still added some territory to the Republic, though, parts of Nevada, Arizona, Oregon, and Mexico too. With the Pacific Ocean to the west, that only leaves the east for further conquest, and the current leadership of the new California Republic had been steadily spreading their influence through Nevada and Arizona for years. Other factions had long since held territory there too, like the Brotherhood of Steel. An alliance between the NCR and the Brotherhood might have held up if there hadn't been such an abundance of amazing technology at stake. Just a little ways over the border in Nevada, the Brotherhood had discovered a solar power station called Helios 1.
Here we go.
It not only had the potential to provide energy for half the Wasteland, but it also controlled an orbiting satellite that could focus sunlight into a deadly beam.
I know it's called, I think it was called Archimedes 2. I did watch it, a lore video by the channel Echo, and I kept on comparing it to like that big beam weapon from Gears of War, but I forgot what it was called. But it did make me understand more why the NCR and the Brotherhood of Steel kept on fighting over Helios 1. Not only because of its energy, providing that much energy, but because of a very powerful weapon.
The Brotherhood always loved their death rays, and they could never let anyone else get their hands on something like that. It was an unprecedented struggle between the Brotherhood and the NCR for control of the facility. To the Brotherhood, it meant keeping a devastating weapon in safe hands, and to the NCR, it meant providing electricity to all of their citizens. Good intentions all around, but everyone was still certain that their side deserved Helios more than the other side. The Brotherhood Paladins have terrifying weapons in their metal-clad hands, but the NCR has soldiers gathered from all over the Republic.
So they had the numbers.
An army of patriots who are willing to die for the idea of building a nation, state by state. Although numbers aren't the only thing that the NCR has. They have the Rangers.
Here we go.
Before the Great War, the West had need of soldiers and lawmen. For centuries, some of the finest of them adopted the title of Ranger, and today's NCR Rangers are made up of the best men and women that the Republic has to offer. They fight to bring law and order to this new West, and that's a powerful motivation for those who can temper their optimism with resolve. The Rangers aren't feared because of the power of their weapons or the sophistication of their armor. The Rangers are feared because of their skill and relentless loyalty to the Republic. They aren't born and bred for this elite position like in the Brotherhood or the Enclave. The Rangers are but humble soldiers who volunteer for the privilege of serving their fellow man. With such loyalty in their multitudes of soldiers, it shouldn't be a surprise that the NCR seized Helios 1. With it, they just might have enough power to light up everything west of the Colorado River. That is, if they can ever get the thing running properly. But Helios is only one of their plans to restore civilization to the world. Right in the middle of the desert, there's a great river, and a huge pre-war dam that once pulled electricity right out of the flowing water. A feat of engineering, this great wall was named after one of the old presidents of a dead empire. The Hoover Dam, they called it.
I do remember. I didn't get to this point, but it was one of the big topics in New Vegas. I know, like, it was called the Battle of Hoover Dam. Like, who would control the dam, so they would have uh control of like that much electricity and power. And also on top of that, that was like one of the biggest events in New Vegas, if I remember correctly. But uh, man, I do kind of regret that I never finished the game.
The NCR wanted that dam, but they discovered they weren't alone. The Colorado River had kept the Republic separated from another army, a veritable legion of bloodthirsty killers.
Caesar's
But
Legion.
that is a story for another day.
All right, we're gonna get into the Caesar's Legion, and what really surprised me was like how much control, like how big territory Caesar's Legion was. I thought it was just a few cities, but no, these guys almost control an entire state.
You've experienced the Fallout series.
Caesar's Legion.
This presentation brought to you by Vault-Tec. Congratulations on receiving the all-clear signal. You are now authorized to exit your Vault-Tec facility. But remember, while you've been safe inside your vault for the past few years, other people haven't been so lucky. Society on the outside has probably changed, and you should be prepared for a variety of possible scenarios. The area around your vault could be populated by cannibalistic mutants, gigantic insects, or maybe even feral children who have enslaved all the grown-ups. Who knows
Damn.
what kind of kooky civilization has formed, but the important thing is that you learn to roll with the punches. Remember, when in Rome, do as the Romans do, and you'll get along just fine with everyone you meet.
A long time ago, there was a saying, those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it. That made more
Yep.
sense back when every child in the country went to school 5 days a week and learned their history from a big room full of books. Of late, it can be a mite hard
Or Zoom calls during just like in COVID.
to find a history book that hasn't been burned or rotted through. So it seems like the good folk of the Wasteland are doomed to repeat a lot of history's mistakes. There's a certain man in Nevada who's deliberately repeating history's mistakes. Calls himself Caesar, spoken by his followers as Kaiser. He's not the first to go by either of those names. A good 2,000 years ago, the first Caesar ruled an empire on the other side of the world. That Caesar probably never even imagined that there was a whole continent over here full of new people to enslave. Well, this new Caesar of the post-apocalyptic world is out to finish what the first one started. Rather than aiming to restore America to what it was in the days before the Great War, Caesar is forging a new nation, using the Roman Empire as some form of twisted inspiration. That's a funny idea for someone to get in their head. Of course, this Caesar had an unconventional upbringing. He was born in 2226 out west in the Boneyard.
Oh, we got some
ruins of
lore.
what used to be Los Angeles. He didn't stay there long. His mother took him away when he was just a baby and raised him with the followers of the apocalypse. Despite their name, these followers aren't one of those doomsday cults. They're just a group of do-gooder intellectuals who try to preserve the knowledge of the old world.
Some of you guys have been telling me to like check out the followers of Apocalypse, like lore videos. I mean, we'll see. I'll take a look at them when I can.
They also keep records about the present, so we know all there is to know about who Caesar was before he declared himself emperor. He used to be a bright young man named Edward Sallow. He was chosen to go on a followers' expedition to study the tribespeople of the Wasteland, and perhaps he was a little too intelligent and educated to be sent out among the savages. He viewed them with a mixture of sneering contempt and misguided pity. He felt it was his duty to civilize them at any cost. In a stroke of irony, it turns out that those uncivilized lands had some books from before the war, books that weren't reduced to a pile of ash. Rare historical records, including an account of the original Caesar's war in Gaul. Sallow could have seen the history of Rome a warning about an empire that was doomed to fall, but instead, he saw something of himself in Caesar, and decided to follow his example.
So that's the
even if it meant
inspiration.
knowingly repeating the mistakes of the past. The Romans described in those old books were, by the standards of their time, the most civilized group in the known world. So mighty was their empire, they even had it better than most folks today. Food, fresh water, roads, and libraries. The problem is that only some Romans had it that good. Their empire was built on conquest and slavery, and the people on the bottom rung of society had it about as bad as a mole rat in a death-clawed den. Under the new title of Caesar, Edward Sallow forged the tribals of Arizona, New Mexico, Utah, and Colorado into an army patterned after the Legion of Rome. Their entire society was converted to the war effort, and they used merciless strategies to decisively end their conflicts. 86 tribes in all, and each one they
86
encountered
tribes.
was either assimilated or annihilated. The men who survived are forced to become soldiers in the Legion. All traces of their original tribe are eradicated, and these slave soldiers have but one option in life: to die in the service of their conquerors. With each new victory, the Legion grows in number, leaving behind no one to oppose them. In his own way, Caesar is bringing order to the Wasteland, one genocide at a time. The women of conquered tribes are not allowed even the dignity of dying in combat. The Legion's strictly regimented society forbids such equality, no matter how skilled those women may be as warriors. This rigid separation ensures that half of the Legion's forces fight, while the other half breeds the next generation of slaves.
Wow.
Caesar would say that slavery is a fitting punishment for the weak and cowardly members of the defeated tribes, a chance for them to prove themselves of worth in their new life. A compelling argument, but nothing can justify being born a slave. Children born into the Legion are separated from their parents, given no knowledge of the culture of their ancestors, and identify themselves only as one small part of the vast Legion. They are all destined to die in Caesar's servitude. Caesar's love.
So basically, conscription of like men being conscripted into the army, and slavery is the foundation of the Caesar's Legion, just like in the Roman times. And so that explains Caesar or Edward Sallow's inspiration of like how he created this, just because he found a book that did not burn and read about like how Rome was advanced and civilized during that time. So he says, maybe I could create something like that. But what I'm curious is like, how did they create all that armor? Like, did they have a blacksmith or someone skilled enough to like create that armor? Because that's what I'm curious about more.
Love of the old times and martial virtues does not prevent him from arming his men with weapons developed in the 21st century. If throwing javelins at their enemy won't get the job done, then the Legion will reach for assault rifles or even more advanced weaponry. They do prefer to fight hand-to-hand whenever possible, and some of the Legion's men carry kinetic energy hammers and ballistic gauntlets enhanced with 21st century technology. Caesar is the absolute ruler of this army, and disobedience is punished with death. A slow death. The Legion burns people alive, crucifies them on poles along the roadside, and forces them to fight to the death in duels for Caesar's amusement. Failure is punished with equal cruelty. Every member of the Legion knows that it is better to die in battle against the enemy than to stand before Caesar in shame. Even his highest-ranking commanders, his legates, can suffer his wrath. A few years ago, Caesar proved this when his army came upon its first worthy opponent, the new California Republic. Even as the Legion was spreading westward, the NCR was exploring territory on their own eastern border. The two nations clashed on the banks of the Colorado River for control of the Hoover Dam in 2277. It proved to be the first defeat for the Legion. The NCR
so they
has
lost.
the biggest, most organized army in the Wasteland, and their rangers are some of the fiercest, most cunning fighters in the wastes. The NCR feigned retreat across the dam and led the Legion to the town of Boulder City, back when there was a town there. The place is a graveyard now, filled with the bones of Legion soldiers who charged to their own doom, certain that the NCR was fleeing in terror before Caesar's might. Caesar himself would have been clever enough to deduce that this was a trap, but he had delegated the task to one of his legates who failed to see that the NCR was only pretending to run.
How'd they get
When
shields?
the Legion reached Boulder City, they found enough explosives to level just about everything in town. Even with the loss of over 100 soldiers during the battle, the NCR managed to rout the Legion and secure the dam and leave the Legion stuck on the other side of the river. The legate who organized that disastrous attack learned just how terrible Caesar's fury can be. He was one of Caesar's oldest friends, Joshua Graham.
Oh,
They
well.
met back before Edward Sallow started calling himself Caesar, but that did not earn Graham any mercy. For his
Damn, he's
failure in the
ruthless.
Battle of Hoover Dam, he was set on fire and thrown down the biggest hole in the Wasteland, the Grand Canyon. There are tales of people surviving all sorts of fates. Men mutated into blobs of goo without dying. Cyborgs that are more machine than man. Hell, there's even a lucky bastard that survived having a tree growing through his brain. Then there's Joshua Graham. People swear that they saw a burned man walk out of the Grand Canyon not long after the Battle of Hoover Dam. Might have been Graham. Might have just been an old ghoul out scavenging.
How would he
Either way,
survive
the
that?
possibility of Graham still being alive is just one more worry for Caesar these days. Like any emperor, Caesar knows that his military must constantly consume new territory. The legion produces little and has left nothing but destruction in its wake. The only way for it to survive is conquest. But now the legion is stalled, camped out on one side of the Hoover Dam, while the NCR waits on the other. Caesar can appreciate the potential of the Hoover Dam. It can generate enough electricity to power the empire he intends to build. For now, though, the Legion prepares a massive force to take it from the NCR. Legionaries cross the river in small groups on barges and have established some camps on the western banks as a brazen affront to the NCR's authority. There are enough Legion soldiers west of the Colorado River to cause plenty of trouble for settlers and soldiers out there. They need a fresh supply of slaves, although the Legion will sometimes burn whole towns to the ground and torture the citizens to death as a symbol of their might. The horrific tales of these attacks help remind people in the West that the Legion is coming eventually. Caesar sees the NCR as a personal challenge, as though everything that's happened west of the river for the last 200 years all happened just so Caesar would have a worthy foe to defeat. And he's definitely up there in that fort of his, planning for the next battle at Hoover Dam. But the dam is only the first part of Caesar's plan, though. He doesn't intend for his army to roam the land indefinitely. He wants to found a new capital city for his empire, and just a stone's throw from the dam is a town that already has a lot in common with ancient Rome. It's a decadent cesspool of every vice that a body can desire. A new Rome. A new Vegas.
I was about to
place
say
where
that.
the walls are high enough to keep out the worst critters the Wasteland can throw at them, and the streets are safe to walk thanks to an army of security bots. Not to mention a plentiful supply of leggy showgirls and roulette tables.
Look at that guy.
Problem is, New Vegas already has its own tyrant. He's been there since before the bombs fell 200 years ago, and he plans to stay there for 200 more.
Mr. House.
That is a story for another day.
All right, now we're gonna jump into New Vegas, but yeah, if Caesar wants to make New Vegas, New Rome, he's gonna have to go against those security bots and Mr. House.
You've experienced the Fallout series in your own way, but
I'm so sorry, guys, but I just love how he does like those little advertisements or commercials, like at the beginning of the videos, like trying to like get us into it. So I really like how he did that. So shout out to the Storyteller for that.
Everyone loves
Robco.
the Boy 2000, but you have an active on-the-go lifestyle. Your friends at Robco know that you need a personal information processor that suits your adventurous attitude.
Pip-Boy.
So we're giving you all the features of our Pip-Boy in an ultra-portable new form. Introducing the Pip-Boy 3000. With this smart device, you won't have to waste time thinking for yourself. This feat of Robco engineering keeps track of your vitals, manages your finances, tells you where to go, and it's stylish. The Pip-Boy 3000 is our most durable Pip-Boy ever. It could even survive a nuclear blast. Get the Pip-Boy 3000 today.
Wow.
Our sale bots are standing by. And coming for Christmas 2077, the Pip-Boy 3000S. Pre-order yours while supplies last.
they don't make them like they used to. Of course, they don't make much of anything anymore. But back before the war, they built most things to last. Just about all of the robots puttering around the Wasteland were constructed back in the 21st century. The amazing thing is, they're still functional after 200 years. Most of them were made by the General Atomics Corporation.
Oh, like the
But
Butler bots.
Securitrons that are rolling around New Vegas, those were made by a competing company called Robco Industries. It's no coincidence that New Vegas is crawling with Robco robots, because the same man who founded the company back in the 21st century is still calling the shots there today. He's over 250 years old by now, but time hasn't slowed him down at all. He's a real pre-war industrialist, and they don't make them like that anymore. Robert House was born in a time when men were only expected to live about 100 years, let alone close to
100 years,
300.
yeah.
There are a few other unusual individuals out there who've managed to stay alive for that long, one way or another. No one's actually seen Mr. House, so some folk think he might have been one of the very first ghouls, gifted with long life, but cursed with a rotting radioactive body. Others think he might be a mutant. The forced evolutionary virus grants indefinite life to mutants, but the first mutants didn't appear in Vegas until decades after the war, and House would have probably died of old age by that time. His associates in New Vegas say he's just a resourceful man who preserved himself somehow, kept himself going all this time on the best life support equipment that pre-war society had to offer. He set up shop inside one of the big casinos on the Vegas Strip back before the war, and hasn't set foot out since. He only communicates through computer screens, so as far as anyone knows, he could be a brain in a jar, or just a sentient computer that thinks it's a man. We do know a lot about House's life from before the war, thanks to history books.
Lucky
He
38.
was quite a flamboyant
Vault
figure
38.
before the bombs fell, consorted with starlets, mingled with heads of state, and built robots for the military. So his exploits were gossiped about in books, magazines, and holotapes. He was born in New Vegas around 2020, back when it was called Las Vegas.
Wait, he was born in 2020, so if it was like right now, dude, he's barely 5 years old.
He came from a wealthy family, was orphaned at a young age, then cheated out of his family fortune. Mr. House didn't need to inherit his family's wealth, however, because he inherited something far more precious: his father's business acumen and knack for engineering.
So he built himself
It didn't
up.
take long for him to amass a fortune of his very own. House founded Robco in 2042 while he was barely in his 20s. Made a fortune building robots, including those clunky Protectron robots that are still clumping their way around the Wasteland. Those bucket of bolts are slow and not too bright, but they're durable and versatile enough that they're used all over the country. Modified Protectrons have been turned into everything from a sheriff to a sex bot. The more rugged Technophiles, that is. The Technophiles also love another product from Robco, the Pip-Boy Personal Information Processor.
Ah,
They were
yes.
issued to everyone inside the vaults, probably to make it easier for Vault Tech to monitor how their little social experiments were progressing. But those little gadgets were built to last, and plenty of notable vault dwellers have used that old Robco tech to make their way through the Wasteland.
Just like the
House
main
and his
character.
company also had a hand in building Liberty Prime, the gigantic killing machine that the Brotherhood of Steel dug up out east.
That I
He
did
seemed
know.
awfully smug about that one. Even had a portrait commissioned of himself standing next to his monstrosity, like a proud father. He never actually got to see Liberty Prime running, though. House was smart enough to see the Great War on the horizon, and he turned his focus from national defense to keeping his hometown Las Vegas safe. Mr. House knew that an apocalyptic war was coming eventually, and in the years leading up to the war, he pulled every string he had to ensure that Vegas would make it through. He poured all of his resources to turn his Lucky 38 casino into a fortress with enough firepower and processing speed to shoot down or hack and disable any missiles that managed to make it near the city. He even built himself a personal army of Securitron robots that were vastly superior to the old Protectrons. Faster, smarter, bigger weapons, and all of them under his personal control.
So just so you know, guys, I didn't get far enough into New Vegas game to fight against the bots, but I have seen them many times in like clips and other people's gameplay videos. So I didn't get that far.
He sealed himself up inside the Lucky 38 and planned out his new world while waiting for the old one to end. But something went wrong with this scheme. House and his army of robots were quiet for close to 2 centuries after the war. He saved the city from the bombs and missiles, and then just disappeared. His tower fortress was nothing more than a lifeless concrete spire growing out of the middle of the desert. Vegas itself deteriorated in the decades after the war, The roulette wheels stopped spinning, the slot machines ceased regurgitating coins, and the tourists were overwhelmed by savage tribals that invaded the Strip. These tribes didn't care about the once great city they inhabited. They took no notice of that impenetrable tower in the middle of the Strip. They spent their days looting and murdering. Some of them even engaged in acts of cannibalism in a town that once boasted all-you-can-eat buffets on every corner. Savages like them would have been exterminated by the new California Republic if they had lived further west. They would have been assimilated by Caesar's legion if they were on the other side of the Colorado River. But in Vegas, they maintained their ways for generations, even as civilization slowly spread through the wasteland around them. There wasn't much reason for Mr. House to interact with the outside world when he was surrounded by these wild men. It took the arrival of NCR scouts to give him hope of rebuilding the world. At that first sign of civilization, New Vegas, a beacon that could be seen all over the Mojave, lit up.
Oh, so that's when it turned on.
When House's robot army suddenly appeared, the first thing it did was set about taming the tribals. The Securitrons were useful minions, but House knew that he would need human hands to restore Vegas to its former glory and draw the interest of the NCR. Under the threat of annihilation, the tribes either gave up their wild ways and allowed Mr. House to remake them in the image of Vegas in its heyday, or left.
So that's how it's got its people.
One band of savages took on the airs of old-world entertainers from House's youth. They shed their gecko-hide clothes, tossed aside their spears, and began dressing in pre-war suits and quoting long-dead singers. Maybe some of the other tribes thought they'd gone soft for living in a swanky casino, but these chairmen cocked their hats and swaggered right to the top of House's news strip. House knew he'd also need a lower class of thug, so he also took in a tribe of brutes that could be counted on to perform the most unspeakable acts. The Omertas were dressed up in suits and ties, but they were no gentlemen. Their fortune was built on the worst form of slavery. They were the flesh peddlers and chem pushers of the Strip. Unfortunately, their services are in high demand. They have become an essential part of New Vegas's economy.
Interesting.
Although the town is a magnet for the seedier denizens of the Wasteland, House has also ensured that New Vegas has something to offer those with more refined sensibilities. The White Glove Society is House's most successful attempt to recreate the splendor of the pre-war days.
White Glove Society?
Once the White Glove Society was no more than a pack of wild animals doing whatever it took to survive. But now they operate the ritziest hotel in town, serving the most succulent steaks in the Wasteland. Diners will need to put on their finest attire, though, because the White Glove Society prefers patrons with marvelous fashion sense, if not particularly good taste.
What are the steaks made out of? That's my question. Do they really have cows, or is that meat from something else? Also, on top of that, the White Glove Society. I don't think I heard of them, so I may have to look up a lore video about them.
These three families ensure that House is at the center of a thriving city. As former rivals, these tribes endlessly plot against each other. But House's Securitrons ensure that there is no overt conflict and that the stores, brothels, and casinos stay open. By the standards of the Wasteland, New Vegas is a veritable utopia. That's why it has drawn the interest of both the new California Republic and Caesar's Legion. Each
and the main
empire
character
must continue expanding their territory, and New Vegas is the golden egg trapped right in the middle. For now, House remains within a stronghold. Walls of steel separate him from the hedonistic paradise of his own city. Outside, two great armies prepare for a war that could crush New Vegas. House's army of robots and tribals is hardly enough to fend off both the NCR and the Legion. Unless he has some secret weapon that hasn't come into play yet. He waited in silence for 200 years. Could there be some missing linchpin needed for that scheme he began before the war? It wouldn't be the first time someone in Vegas had an ace up their sleeve. No matter who holds the trump card in the war ahead, there'll be plenty.
I just want to say something, guys. So now that explains. Judging by that little slot right there in the shields, looks like Caesar Legion managed to find like some riot shields and just like repaint them. So that explains it. Because I was about to say like either they created that from scratch or they found those and just like redesigned them.
No matter who holds the trump card in the war ahead, there'll be plenty of innocent people who will cash out. Caesar views the soldiers in his legion as expendable pawns who exist only to die in his name. The NCR's leadership has committed mass slaughter of those who stand in the way of their noble but misguided goals. And House's minions have no mercy for the tribes that refuse to yield to his vision of New Vegas. Trapped within this triangle are countless smaller settlements and tribes, peoples and societies that are constantly in danger of being eradicated or assimilated.
Great
Of them,
cons.
none have suffered greater struggle than the Great Khans, a once proud band of raiders who, like the NCR, can trace their roots back to the opening of the first vaults. It can be difficult to feel pity for a gang of chem-dealing raiders, but the Khans have faced extinction time and time again, proving to be one of the most resilient groups in the Wasteland. That kind of resilience is something even Mr. House could respect. But that is a story for another day.
All right. So the next one is the Great Cons, and the very last video we're going to be checking out. But either way, I really like this one so far, like the lore about Mr. House and how he converted Las Vegas into New Vegas and where the people came from. So he basically coerced many of the tribes outside and turned them, I guess you could say, like rehabilitated or like re-civilized them into New Vegas. But one thing I learned is the the White Glove Society. So I gotta find out more about them. All right, next video, the Great Cons.
You've experienced the Fallout series.
This is Sally. 6 months ago, Sally was an ordinary girl who enjoyed baking cupcakes with Mom and playing with her neighborhood pals. But Sally felt like she wasn't as clever as the other children. That's when her new friend, Butch, offered her something called mentats. They looked like candy, but they were actually recreational chemicals.
Mentats?
Or chems for short. The mentats made Sally feel like the smartest girl in the world.
Uh-oh.
But only for a little while. When they wore off, she felt dumber than ever. And before long, she was nothing but a hooligan, a criminal, a dope fiend. It could happen to your children too, even with just one mentat. So store your chems safely and out of the reach of children. The proceeding was a public service message from MedTech, makers of the Fixer anti-addiction pills, now available at your local Super Duper Mart.
What the?
At night, the way
Okay, that was something else. But wait, I want to read that message.
Service message from MedTech, makers of the Fixer anti-addiction pill.
Wait, okay, so disclaimer. Fixer permanently clears any addiction. The addiction is in fact removed, but it can be replaced by Fixer addiction. Only 6 out of 10 users claimed Fixer addiction after extended use. Side effects include immediate death, spontaneous combustion, or the sniffles. So one is death, the second one is death, and the third is just something mild. Oh my god. Poor Sally. She went through it.
At night, the wasteland is dotted with towns that light up the darkness. Each one is some settler's attempt at rebuilding civilization. The wasteland holds endless wonders and mysteries. You'll never see them from within the walls of one village. Life on the road doesn't leave time for growing crops or herding Brahmin, so some people survive by taking what they need. Such predatory behavior is hardly commendable, but it does take strength to live the life of a raider, and who doesn't respect strength? Every few miles, there's some new group of raiders on the prowl, always certain that their strength gives them the right to prey on the weak. And every damned one of them has a theatrical name and flamboyant heraldry. The Fiends, the Jackals,
The Yakuza.
Every pack of chem addicts that stumbles across a history book just decides to play dress-up and terrorize the nearest village.
They recreated the
Fortunately,
Yakuza?
most raider gangs don't last long. Entire groups can be exterminated in one fight gone wrong, or the whole lot can overdose on a batch of Med-X that's been cut too pure. But a few of the raider gangs have managed to stick around for generation after generation. and the most resilient by far is the Khans. A long time ago, many years before even the Great War, there was a place called Mongolia, home of the Khans, some of the toughest warriors the world had ever seen. They were led by a man called Genghis, and under his rule they came closer to conquering the world than anyone else. Even 1,000 years later, people still know the name. The Khans of the modern Wasteland aren't actually descendants of the originals from Mongolia. They came out of Vault 15 in 2121, along with a few other raider gangs, the people who founded the village of Shady Sands. The folks that settled down in Shady Sands couldn't wait to start rebuilding civilization, but the rest, they took a liking to the Wasteland just as it was. Some of those survivors from Vault 15 formed a gang called the Vipers, a band of kooks that worship snakes. They'll be remembered in the
Really?
holotapes because one of them managed to kill the High Elder of the Brotherhood of Steel a century ago.
Oh,
The
wow.
Vipers are nothing compared to the most infamous raider gang that came from Vault 15, the Khans. The Khans value strength above all other qualities. When that vault opened, they knew that the world had become a place where the strong would thrive while the weak became prey. For years, they ranged through the remains of Arizona and California, stealing what they could carry, raising anything left behind. Under the leadership of a man called Death Hand, they thrived in an age where other
Death
bands
Hand.
barely managed to survive at all. In time, Death Hand grew old, his body covered in scars from a lifetime of battle. Even then, there was only one person who had the might to best him in a fair fight, his own son, Garl. The Khans would only accept leadership from the greatest warrior among them. There is no truer test of a person's strength than a fight to the death. Garl killed his own father for the right to lead the Khans, and took the title of Death Hand as his own. He led the Khans in their raids against Shady Sands and other towns in New California for years afterwards. Many settlers considered him nothing more than a bullying, low-life brute, but others suspected that Garl Death Hand was merely seeking a worthy foe. If Garl had played his cards right, he might have lived long enough to have a son of his own and one day pass on the title of Death Hand, but before he could produce an heir, he met his end. In 2162, Garl and his gang had kidnapped a girl from Shady Sands. She turned out to be the mayor's daughter, Tandy. That was
Here we go.
too far for the people of Shady Sands, and it wasn't long before some do-gooder in a Vault 13 jumpsuit showed up at the primary Khan's camp demanding that Garl
Us.
release her. The legend of the Vault Dweller had just begun, and the Khans couldn't have known just what they were up against. But Garl had finally found a true equal to face in combat. The Khans were hardly the greatest threat that the Vault Dweller had to deal with, and they weren't even mentioned in the Dweller's memoir. Once a damsel in distress, Tandy went on to become president of the New California Republic, where she turned the NCR into a powerhouse that Khans could never hope to match. Only one Khan managed to survive the camp massacre, a boy named Darien, who hid during the ruckus. Darien spent the rest of his life trying to atone for his act of cowardice. He created a gang called the New Khans and spent 80 years harassing Tandy and the people of her New California Republic. What Darien lacked in courage, he made up for in leadership. His new Khans were a bunch of real bruisers, maybe even tougher than the gang from the old Death Hand days. These new Khans were such terrors that they even took control of Vault 15 right under the NCR's nose. Tandy couldn't let that stand, so she sent an operative to deal with the new Khans. The operative just happened to be a direct descendant of the Vault Dweller who had slaughtered the original Khans. The old bird probably got a laugh at that. By that time, Darien was a half-crazed old man, but he went down with a hell of a good fight. The Vault 15 security system recorded his final battle, and he would have made Garl Death Hand proud. Even though Darien was dead, the Khans lived on. A handful of raiders away from Garl's camp survived.
So they went from great Khans to new Khans. I mean, no matter how close they are to extinction, they will somehow bounce back.
Carried the legacy of the Khans with them. The largest group lived away on the fringes of the NCR under Papa Khan, called the Great Khans to honor their illustrious heritage. In 2267,
Papa Khan
led them east where they discovered the ruins of Vegas. That was years before Robert House had unleashed his army of robots. The Great Khans found a home among the hardened tribals that inhabited Vegas back then. There the Khans could test their mettle against the other warriors. They wouldn't have to worry about the Vault Dweller's great-grandkids showing up to kill them all. The Great Khans had a few good years there, until Mr. House decided to send out his Securitron army and civilize the inhabitants of his town. About the same time, the NCR had begun to spread east into Nevada, too. The Great Khans know more than anyone that annihilation is an ever-present threat in the Wasteland. They suddenly faced a war against two armies, so they chose to abandon Vegas rather than tempt fate. Outside of Vegas, they were of little interest to House, but they still fought NCR troops at every opportunity. The new California Republic had grown increasingly ruthless in its efforts to acquire new territory. There are those in the Mojave who saw the Great Khans as victims of NCR hegemony. The two groups had been enemies for generations, and their battles were fought with little mercy from either side. The NCR eventually won a decisive victory, though, the Battle of Bitter Springs, although most people around the Mojave call it the Bitter Springs Massacre.
The Bitter Springs Massacre.
Bitter Springs was identified by NCR Intel as the Khans' base of operation. The NCR cornered the Great Khans and invaded the camp. That's when the Khans started evacuating the camp down a nearby canyon. First recon troops stationed there opened fire and killed most of the gang. They thought they were shooting raiders flanking their troops. They ended up killing women and children, old folks too. Almost anyone who was at Bitter Springs has a different account of what happened.
So they just killed everyone.
Some miscommunication between the NCR commanders, or bad reconnaissance at the site, or it could have been a deliberate act of genocide. More than a few NCR troops just walked away from the army after that. Even if the massacre can be blamed on bad intel, the soldiers who pulled the trigger still had to hold themselves accountable for their own actions. Some of them have taken jobs as mercenaries protecting towns in the Mojave. Get them drunk enough and they might talk about what they did at Bitter Springs. But most of them are
was that a side mission?
So they can forget. The Khans, of course, can never forget Bitter Springs. The massacre left the Great Khans a broken people. The ones that survived limped away to the west, way out in Red Rock Canyon. There, the Great Khans are out of the way of the NCR and New Vegas. They lack the brute force and numbers to survive as raiders like in the old days. And now they make a living by manufacturing chems and selling them to other raider gangs.
So they became
Papa Khan is aware of
drug
just
dealers.
how far his people have fallen. The NCR bears the full weight of his wrath. He has even accepted envoys from Caesar in the hope that joining the Legion will allow him some final act of revenge against the NCR in the coming war. A fool's hope, but that might be all that the once great Khans have left. They have little choice but to hide in their canyon, lamenting their lost power. Still, even a group of broken-down chem dealers have it pretty good when compared to some people in the Wasteland, if you can call them people. There are wretches out there who'd be happy just to have skin that isn't rotting off their faces. But that
makes sense.
Is a story for another day.
I really like that one. Like talking about the Great Khans. All right, so that's another 5 videos from the Storyteller. So shout out and credit goes to the Storyteller. And again, as always, rest in peace. So this one was really heavily focused on New Vegas. The NCR, Caesar's Legion, Mr. House's New Vegas, and the Great Khans. But I don't think the Enclave is focused on New Vegas, maybe a different Fallout game. So the next time you guys see me, we'll be doing another 5 videos. We'll be looking into the Ghouls, Ulysses Divide, Caesar's Legates, the old time religion, and looks like Think Tank's Big MT. Well, either way, I'm really looking forward to it and hope you guys really enjoyed these 5 videos because I really did. I learned a lot from them, and that's all I got for today, guys. So thank you guys for tuning in. Thank you guys for watching. Hit that notification bell so you don't want to drop another video. And also shout out to all my members, subscribers, viewers. You guys are amazing. Thank you so much for your support, guys. I really do appreciate it. So without anything else, see you guys next time.